Welcome back to the studio. Today outside we have our first measurable snowfall of the season, which is kind of a nice thing for me. I really love the snow, but I also really love the cooler weather. This whole last week I spent in this room trying to do a pretty deep cleaning on the whole studio from top to bottom, cobwebs to floor. I'm always amazed because I don't really do a lot in here except for quilt on the machine. Most of my piecing and cutting is done upstairs. So I'm always surprised just how dirty this room gets with as little as I do in here. But I spent the whole week rearranging, rehanging the samples, re-evaluating the lighting, because sometimes the lighting doesn't always work in our favor here. And so I only have one job left. I just picked up some new white denim for my ironing board. I'm sure many of you have noticed that I don't use generally quilting type supplies or equipment in the room. Like I use Husky toolboxes for my tools. I have two of those, and I have this workbench. And the workbench I went ahead and made just a board, covered it with the wool, one of those thick wool pads that they sell that are so amazing, really great for sending the heat back up. But my cover keeps getting dirty, and part of that's my fault. A couple weeks ago I was actually trying to touch up the stain on a piece of furniture and I got stain on here, so that definitely had to be changed. But that's my last task. Got the denim today, so I'll recover the table this week and then we'll be up to snuff again. Just moving the samples around, I try and move them around to keep the room entertaining, but I'm amazed at how quick it starts to look shabby if I don't shift the whole room around. So I've done that, and I think it looks pretty good again. Something else I've said in the past, I know a lot of people are afraid that the past will catch up with them, but I'm always trying to catch up with my past. This is a quilt top that I definitely made 17 to 20 years ago when I was living down south. As soon as Robin Pandolph fabric came out, I was deeply in love with that whole line, that whole feel of the fabric. The vintage florals hit me really hard. I like masculine furniture like arts and crafts, mission style, really boxy furniture. That's why all the equipment in here is Husky men's stuff. But as far as fabric goes, I've always liked the vintage floral delicate feel. So I have a ton of this Robin Pandolph fabric, but this quilt top I made years and years ago when I was still living down south, and it's basically just alternating blocks of flying geese units with solid squares. So if you had like a cake stack, something like that would be really good for this, for all these alternating squares. They probably are just about 10 inches, but it's just an alternating. It is a weird size though. It's like 66 inches wide by like 106, so I don't know exactly why I made it that size, or if I was even aware that I was doing it, because like I said, it's 20 years ago. But I'm going to finally get this on the machine. I already have my backing picked out. It was I always pick up those 108-inch wide backings now, especially when they have them on sale. A lot of places do like a Wednesday backing sale. They'll have one or two backings on sale. And also some of the local quilt shops around me will do that. We have a funny kind of a drugstore or hardware store in a neighboring town that has a small fabrics selection, and they have really low prices anyway, but when they have their annual sale, their backing fabric's like $8 a yard. So it always feels kind of stiff when you buy it, but after I take it home and wash it, it's as soft as anything else. So yeah, I just have on one of my backings on there. It's just a kind of a cream colored that will match the background of this. I am going to be doing something a little unusual today with the quilting design. It's an idea that I had a while back, and I'm going to do this more than once because it's like Pandora's box. I'm sure you've seen a million different things. I mean, they talk about Reese Cup was somebody stuck a peanut butter in the chocolate or whatever, but also with all kinds of Cheetos come with 2 different flavors in a pack. There's all kinds of things that are mixing things up, mashing things up and coming up with kind of a new combination or a new taste or a new look. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. When I started with my IntelliQuilter, I didn't get classes from an instructor. I did purchase a couple books on IntelliQuilter, but I installed it myself on the machine because I bought a used IntelliQuilter. And I've just learned myself by watching little video clips or reading the blog on IntelliQuilter website. But there are still many things I don't know, and there's probably things that I do that are not the norm. Excuse me. So I'm fine with that, by the way. But one of the things I didn't understand in the beginning was when you're bringing in a panto design, you always have to bring it in twice. And it's the even and odd rows. Now I imagine that is to give you editing options for how you're doing things. And I always just wondered, in the beginning, I was trying to figure out what editing options that would help you utilize, and I still don't really know. But then I started thinking about something else. And I know this is probably specific to IntelliQuilter only. I don't know if Pro Stitcher or any of the other automated machines will allow you to do this. So I may be limiting the audience a little bit, but maybe it will spark your imagination. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you brought in 2 different pantos, and would that be possible? So I quickly played around one day and found out that it certainly is possible to do. But not all pantos were designed to interlink with each other. Some of them have different undulating patterns. So then it became a little bit of a challenge to see which patterns I could use, and I came up with like really quickly 8 or 10. And I was talking to Patricia about this on the phone one day. We were just chatting, and so I sent her some screenshots, and she thought it was fun also. So I'm going to be showing you one of those combinations today, and I haven't picked it out yet which one I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and get the backing finished, the batting on there, and I'll put my quilt top on. I will say that because this is such a weird size, in fact, I may have said 106, I think it's 116 long. I was going to load this sideways because I wanted to express that also. I have said in the past that pay attention when you're loading a panto or a quilt. You could load it vertically or horizontally depending on the quilting design you're going to use. If it's a non-directional quilting design, which would just be an overall, like a geometric, a curve or something like that, falling leaves, you could load your quilt vertically or horizontally. If you load it horizontally, the long way going this way, then you have fewer repeats that you have to do, and it's rolling up the quilt that takes the most time when you're doing edge-to-edge design. So if you have fewer of those roll-ups, you can finish the quilt quicker. Even though it's taking a little bit longer to stitch on the side, it's the roll-ups that we have that take us time. So if you can go from doing 10 roll-ups to maybe 5 or 6, you've saved 4 roll-ups. You know, if it takes you 5 or 10 minutes, that could be 20 to 40 minutes shaved off of a quilt. And really, it only comes down to whether the quilting design you're going to use is directional or not. So I was going to load this horizontally, but this exceeds the width of my 108-inch wide backing, and so that eliminated that. So I will be doing this the long way. But I'm going to go ahead and finish that up. I have a cup of tea that I'm going to use to keep me company while I do that. I'm not going to make you watch all of my loading. And I'm also going to turn my music back on because I love music. Today I'm listening to just my favorites, which are things that I've said I liked over the last 3 or 4 years. So I already did you a spin around the room, and when I get the quilt loaded, then we'll go ahead and look at the IQ. And I might even take you inside before I actually start stitching and on the IQ stick on the computer to show you some of the other combinations. Now these are not going to interlock necessarily perfectly all the time unless you get a set of designs that like ECAT that Patricia just had on the weekly design deal for me last week. There was 4 versions of that panto, and I downloaded all 4. Those obviously are going to interlock beautifully together because they were designed together. They're just slight variations. Jamie Wallen also has a few that were just slight variations on a theme of the panto, and so those will be less obvious when they're quilted out. Some of the other ones I was combining a geometric with a more organic shape. So there was a lot of curves in one panto. The next one would be more lines and grids. And so there's a whole variety of options, and it just is kind of like a new thing to spark your interest. So I'm going to quit talking and get to work pinning the quilt onto the frame. I have the top done, I haven't done the bottom, and then we'll go ahead and bring you back in and we'll see just how far we get on this today. I am using a different lighting system on the sides, so I'm hoping that it will illuminate the stitching a little bit better. Another thing I didn't mention, I'm using Supreme batting from Quilters Dream Cotton this time. I have my dimples on the upper side and my pimples on the lower side. Just as a way to remember that, dimples are things that people enjoy seeing in other people. Pimples are what most people don't want to see on somebody else. So the pimples are facing down where you can't see them. The dimples are on the upper side. The dimples are just little indentations on the top of the batting, and the pimples are just little tiny, very tiny little burrs of the cotton that has been punched through during that needle punching process. And that's just the way that I have found to do it, so that's how my batting is. Recently I posted a video. I've done several times where I have uploaded files to the IQ, and I do it following the prompts of the IQ, exactly as it says to do it. And some people were asking about that, why I did it. But I just wanted to, I'm not going to debate anybody on it because everybody should be doing exactly what they want to do with their equipment. But I will say, when I started, I purchased 2 books on how to use the IntelliQuilter. Use Your IQ by Christine Mary and Got IQ by Linda G. Miller. Now this one's from 2017. I don't know when this one was done. Let's see. 2010. 2010, 2017. Both of these books indicate that you can upload designs to the tablet in active mode or in demo mode. I also have to believe that because the IQ tablet recognizes whether you're attached to the machine or not, it automatically knows if you're in demo mode or not. And when you're in different modes, it allows you to do different things. I have to believe that if you were not supposed to upload in active mode, then that option would not be available to you. Also, since the machine and software have been around so long, if it was a detriment to upload videos or upload files in the active mode, I would think that they would have come up with an update for that in the last 12 years. So that is why I feel like it's safe to go ahead and upload. You can see right here on the main menu, we're in active mode. It gives me the option to load designs. So I'm going to load just as I normally would. I have 3 new files on here. It just uploaded them, so now I can remove my USB stick and put it back on the base. making sure I'm secure. Now I do have USB ports in the back. I have tried to upload from those, and for whatever reason nothing happened when I put the USB stick in those. Now the USB stick works for the pointer that I have for marking out blocks on the quilt, but when I tried it, it didn't work for uploading a file. So not to be argumentative, but that is why I feel like it's safe to go ahead and do that. I just wanted to be able to speak to that in the video. So now that I have uploaded the design, what I'm going to do next is even an extra step. I have an IQ stick, which allows me to plug this USB stick into my computer, my desktop, and the desktop screen becomes an IQ tablet for me to do design work on. I don't do a lot of design work on it. Mostly the reason I went to the extra mile to get this was for you. So I could do screen capture video on the computer, which is much clearer than anything I can do with the camera. And then I can show you how I play with things on the design part of the IQ without you having to see from the camera to the screen and fight reflections. So I'm going to go ahead now and synchronize my IQ stick so I can get the 3 new designs I just loaded. So again, I'm going to go ahead and hit load design, but I'm going to hit sync this time, and it's asking me to insert the IQ stick while we're in active mode. And it's just going to update and go ahead and change the designs. And I want to do an interactive synchronize so that anything not on one will go to the other. And my mystical feathers and my fanfare that I did in my last video are both coming onto the stick. And so it says I can remove and touch back. So I've now uploaded my designs to the IQ tablet in active mode. I have synced my IQ stick with the IQ tablet in active mode. And now I'm ready to go ahead and do my design work. I'm going to go ahead and play with this a little bit, but I'm going to go back inside and insert this into the computer and do a screen capture video of the process of choosing more than one Panto design and just show you some of the options. Now obviously I'm only going to be using one today, and the one that I'm going to be using is the simplest kind of this to do, and that's where there's 2 or 3 Pantos in the exact same design collection that only have slight variations. I'm going to be using Jamie Wallen from Quilters Apothecary, Mystical Feathers. He has Mystical Feathers 1, Mystical Feathers 2, and Mystical Feathers 3. And because they undulate in exactly the same pattern, this is going to be a really easy one to do. I'm just going to do, I think, 2 and 3 because they're the most interesting. And so every other feather will be a slightly different variation down the quilt. But also on the computer, I'm going to show you some of the other ones that I played with earlier, and they will be something I'm going to play with in other videos. So I'm going to go ahead and get inside, and then I can load this design and we can get sewing when we get there. We are at the computer, and I have my IQ stick in the USB port of the computer, so my computer screen looks like the IQ tablet. And I'm going to click on Design Sew Quilt, Start New. We're going to replace the work in progress and reset the clock. And we're going to work on a pantograph. We're going to enter the rectangle manually because we're not attached to the machine. And I'm just going to do a 60 by 80 quilt. Just something random, and click Continue. Now the one that I'm working on today, I'm going to hit Finished, is a variation of a design by Jamie Wallen from Quilters Apothecary. Now I have all three of the variations on my tablet, so the ones that I will show you are Mystical Feathers 1, 2, and 3. So here we have Mystical Feathers 1 and Mystical Feathers 2 and Mystical Feathers 3. You can also see that I include here in the end the height of each of the designs. I'm not sure why, but the Mystical Feathers 1 was a half an inch smaller than Mystical Feathers 2 and 3. They were both 8 3/4. But I wanted the more interest, so I chose Mystical Feathers 2 and Mystical Feathers 3. So I'm going to select Mystical Feathers 1 for the start, and then for the even rows I'm going to select Mystical Feathers 3. And here you see we have the Mystical Feathers with the spine or the vein, and then we have the Mystical Feathers with the echo. So just like normal, I'm going to click on the gap button and run my finger diagonally. In this case, it's the cursor of my computer, and I'm just going to bring those together. This one's very easy because the main shape of the two pantos are almost identical. It's the inside that's different. So it's very easy to get these to nest together perfectly. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on pattern height, and what it says we are altering is always the row height, but it's really the pattern height we're after here. So we'll just have to keep a track of that. So we're going to try and get that down to 8 3/4. And I'm just going to keep shrinking this down until we get close to that. I'm just a little under 9 inches, so I'm fine with that. And we could have used the plus or minus button, and we also could have used the keyboard if we had an idea of what the math would have actually been. So this is the first variation. You can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 rows of this to stitch out with a couple little partial rows. Also, I can do 2 passes at once. I know that because I've already done it. So I really only have like 7 roll-ups on this. So I can go ahead and hit finished. And we have all of our basic information. It's asking what kind of transition type we're going to have. We're going to do continuous. We know we won't be able to change it, and now we could go ahead and sew quilt. Now we can't actually sew the quilt today because we're not attached to the machine, but as soon as we cut this section of the video, you'll see me do it on the actual quilt outside. So I'm going to show you a couple other ones. No, I don't want to save it because I've already saved it. So I want to show you a couple other ones that I picked out just to show you something completely different. We're going to design sew quilt, and we're going to edit sew existing, because these I saved in the work in progress. And here it is. This one was origami and pergola. So these two designs alternating, it gives you a much different look. These two have about the same kind of undulating nesting curve to them in general, but they aren't exactly the same. But you can see that it gives you a completely different look, would add some interest to the quilt, and you could, if you wanted to, change the colors of the thread as you were going. Just to give it an even different look. You could do the stars in blue and the leaves in green, or whatever colors you wanted, but it would certainly give a lot more interest to the quilt. I thought I had saved whole quilts. Here we go. Let's see there. That is the origami pergola. This is retro lines and river rock. You can see, again, we did the same thing. We alternated a very geometric design, the retro lines, and then we added the pebble rocks in the alternating rows. And you could nest these as close or as tight as you wanted to. If I went a little bit closer together on the gap, I could have had some of these lines from the retro lines entering the pebbles. I also could have gone in and edited those little clips out, or when it gets time to sew each row, I could just add a no-sew zone once the pebbles was sewn, I could add a no-sew zone so that wherever these inserted into the pebbles, it would just be eliminated. So this is another visual option for you to give you a very distinctly different look. This would be really great on a modern quilt. This one is used Wandering Feather and Feather Flurry by Jamie Wallen. Now there's quite a few patterns that create almost a flat edge that would be used for doing borders. And they work really well in borders or sashing because they have such a complete flat line at the top and bottom. And so those nest together really well. And again, this gives you a lot of visual interest. You have the variance between the density on the Wandering Feathers and then the Feather Flurry. And again, both of these quilts that I just showed you were the same size and design. They were 60 wide by 80 high, so it would give you the same effect, but you can see you don't have as many rows on this particular quilt to do. And let me see if there's any other ones. No, that was the last one that I had saved. So that is just how easy the process is. Some of these are a little bit, take a little bit more work than others because you'd have to shift them left to right to make sure that the nest goes into each other from the even and odd rows. But it's a fairly easy process, and most people have enough designs that it gives you something fun to at least play with while you're just sitting on the couch watching evening sitcoms. But I'd be really curious to hear what you think about the idea of using alternating rows of different pantos. And also, if some of you have some time to play, I'd really, really love to see some of the combinations that you come up with. Now, today I'm going to be finishing the quilt out with the option that I chose, which was just a variation of the same panto, Mystical Feathers 2 and Mystical Feathers 3 by Jamie Wallen. But in future videos, when I have a quilt that's appropriate to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use one of these other variations because I really like the way it looks. And I also really like the thicker batting that I used in this particular quilt today, and I hope it shows up well on the computer. So let's finish this up for now inside, and we'll get outside sewing on the machine. I am at my start point in the upper left-hand corner of the quilt. I've got the measurement of my quilt, so I'm going to add a couple inches to that, but I'm going to go ahead and hit Design Sew, Start New. We have a work in progress. Do we want to replace it? Yes. Do we want to permanently erase it? Yes. And we're going to reset our clock. I'm going to be using a pantograph, in this case 2 pantographs, and I'm going to enter rectangle manually. It is 70 by 110. I had already input that, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter twice and continue. So it brings up my virtual quilt top here. I'm going to hit finished. I'm going to click downloads because this 2 files I'm going to be using are still in the downloads. I haven't cleaned the library yet. So I'm going to go to M for Mystical Feather. And here are my 3 Mystical Feathers that I just downloaded. I'm going to be using Mystical Feather 2, continue, and Mystical Feather 3, continue. So every other row is a different design. 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, all the way down. So I'm going to hit gap because there's too much space in between there, and I'm just going to run my finger until these interlock. Because these are two variations of the same design, I didn't even have to do very much. These interlock beautifully. It's just because there's slight variations. Next thing I'm going to do is touch pattern height. The pattern height right now is 17.154. The intended size of this design was 8.75, so I'm going to decrease that. But you have to know that when you touch this button, what you're adjusting is the row height. It just happens to carry along with it the pattern height. So even though the row height is what's highlighted, it's the pattern height is what we're going to be looking for. So again, you could use the keyboard if you had an idea of how small to make it, the plus and minus, or you could just run your finger diagonally on the screen until you get to somewhere around 8.75. And I'm actually going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to take it to 9 inches. I don't think stylistically it's going to make a big difference, but it will reduce the amount of times I have to roll up the quilt. So I just made it a tiny bit bigger. I don't think it's going to change anything too much. So I'm at 9.014, so it's maybe a quarter of an inch bigger. So I'm going to hit finished. Our type of transition is continuous, so we're going to accept that, and we won't be able to change it. What that means is when the design goes off of the quilt and then has to come back on at the side, do we want it to continue sewing? And I do, because I based my edges, and it just speeds things up a little bit. So now I'm going to hit sew quilt, and I'm going to select the very first pattern, which is the very, very top. Hit continue. I'm going to ask for Panto sequencing assistance. I'm going to do alternating rows back and forth, so it's going to sew left to right, and then the next one's going to sew right to left. It just, to me, saves a little bit of time. It seems like it makes logical sense. And in between rows, what do I want it to do? I want to tie off. So I just sequenced the whole quilt. Now I can hit sew quilt. I have to put my machine on manual. And I'm didn't pull up my thread yet. And I will say one more thing before I hit the go button. I was going to use red and green thread in alternating rows so that these rows showed out a little bit better for the camera. And I put green thread on first, and I basted the quilt, and I hated how dark the green thread was on the beige background. Hated it so much that I couldn't proceed. So I started looking at shades of pink and a minty green or a lighter green, and they didn't match the colors of the quilt. So then I was looking at tan, and I didn't have a tan thread in the right color. So what I ended up doing was choosing one thread. It's an isocord variegated. It's odd really, because it's almost like has a little bit of fluorescent green, and it goes into a brown. And I don't even know why I decided to put it on the quilt to see if it looked good, but I did, and it's the one I like the best. So I hope I like it when it starts sewing. So we're gonna find out. This is my first row, and on this row that Jamie designed, the mystical feathers, there's just a vein in the leaf. And on the second row, it's an echo of the shape of the feather itself. And so this quilt is going to alternate between these two designs all the way down the quilt. As long as we pay attention to our gap when we're designing these two pantos, you're going to see they're going to nest together as beautifully as if you had only used one. And so it's going to repeat that process all the way down. You can also see, or maybe you can't see, how good this thread color works, this variegated. It's kind of a really weird brown, yellowy green, which wouldn't have occurred to me at first to match with this. I don't even know why I pulled it out, except it was just intuition. But I really like the way it's looking. The Supreme batting is giving me a little bit more dimension. Now the quilt is pulled tight as a drum right now, so it's not going to be puffy as much as it will be once it's released. But I think the definition's working here. Also, I hope, I've tried some new lighting today. I hope the new lighting on the sides instead of down lighting will help illuminate the quilting pattern a little bit better. It's something that I'm constantly working, trying to improve the visual effects of the videos, the ideas that we come up with, and the outcome. So I have the very first row, which I don't even really count, it's just little dibs at the top. And then I have the first two stitch out of each of the designs. This is as far as I can go without rolling up the quilt. So I'm going to go ahead and roll up the quilt now. You've seen me do that, so I'm not going to bore you with that as I go through. I'm just going to release the side tension, lift up my bar that's holding the bottom of the top of the quilt in place, and I'm going to select a piece of the design from the next row, whatever the highest peak is. That's where I'm going to drop my needle and roll the quilt forward, and then I'm going to go ahead and realign to something that's already been sewn. But I'm probably going to be choosing something from the inside of the feather where it comes to a point, because that gives you the most precise realignment. Curves are kind of hard to know if you're getting it exactly the same place, but a pinpoint of a design doesn't. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to stick this in here just in case I don't get the other portion done. This is Mystical Feather 1, which you can just see is a beautiful feather with no insert in the center. Mystical Feathers 2 has a vein in the middle of each of the feathers, and then Mystical Feather 3 has an echo of the plume itself. And these two are the ones that I'm going to be using. I guess you can see it best this way. You can see the vein and then the echo, and it's going to repeat like that down the process of the quilt. Here's some of the thread colors. I put the green away already, but I was thinking about using a cream, pink, gold, red, and this odd combination here is the one that won the day. So this is the easiest of all of the types of using two pantos to do something that is just a slight different interpretation of the same design. And this is a good reason to buy both when you're shopping. I got all three of these when they were on sale, when we had our digital sale. So it makes it a little bit fun to play with those. But also I'm going to be showing you some where they're completely different, where one's geometric and one's organic, and a much different look you're going to get from the finished outcome. I don't know if you can see a difference in the room, but I made some changes for lighting. I covered up the two back windows so they don't create a backlighting, which would change how the camera focuses in on the subject, which is the quilting frame and the machine itself. Also, I'm using different lights on the side. I'm hoping that it illuminates the top of the quilt a little bit better, so that's maybe something you could comment on and let me know if these changes were pleasing to you or if you didn't find them effective at all. I kind of matched the quilt today. Anyway, I'm halfway through this particular quilt. I've already shown you some of the stitching. I'm not going to keep boring you with that. But I will show you when we get closer to the end what the finished piece looks like. I know that I said at the beginning that this is a process that would be most user-friendly to the IntelliQuilter. Now, I'm not familiar with any of the other brands of robotic quilting that manufacturers have made, so it's possible that others are able to do this as well. But I just wanted to say that that's not the only way that you could do this. Any of the designs that we have in a tearaway, certainly ones that would be like this that are just variations of the same design, could certainly be done as well, because you're just placing that tissue paper on the top of your quilt and either doing it with the long arm or the domestic machine. The whole time you would be learning your muscle memory on how to do those designs. Likewise with a pantograph, as long as you had the pantograph grids on top of the pantograph, you could also switch out the two pantos and do the same thing. Because the outer border, the outer element of this design is the same in both, it's only the inside, all you would really have to do is in colored dry erase marker is use the inside of the leaf in a color on your pantograph grids once and then leave your other panto in place. And so in one pass you would be following the actual pantograph. In the second pass you'd be following your dry erase marker on the inside and the design on the outside. So it's certainly something that is doable for both of these processes. So it just takes a little bit of creative thinking when you want to come up with a new idea. And I'm really excited about this idea. I really like the way it's giving an additional look to the quilt. So I hope that's something you like too. Now I know when we get to more adventurous combinations, it'll give you a completely different look, like with the geometric and the feathers or florals. But I'll just have to see how many tops I have laying around to practice that on. Anyway, I'm going to get back to stitching. I quit yesterday when I got to the halfway point, so I'm just going to kick the machine up again and get started. I always like to turn my motors on first before I get to the front of the machine, because I don't like that beeping. So So this is a wrap on this flying geese quilt. Flying geese with alternate squares. Probably I made these with a cake stack or a layer cake. Robin Pandolph fabric, who I love. Love her fabric, love her designs. And then I used 2 of Jamie Wallen's quilting designs. In this case, there were 3 available: Mystical Feathers 1, Mystical Feathers 2, which I used, and Mystical Feathers 3, which I also used. We alternated those 2 pantos using the IntelliQuilter, and it didn't, even though I've never done this before, this is one of the times that I had absolutely no issues with the idea concept. Sewed out beautifully. It made no difference in any of the functional ways that I quilted. The gap was the same. Everything was functionally the same. Now I want to try this again, but not using 2 alternating patterns of the same theme, I'm going to be using different themes altogether, like a geometric and then a floral, or a geometric and a feather, and see how that works. But it probably won't be in the next week or two, because I have other things that I have to do. But I really like the way this turned out. I'm also going to try and do the tutorial, well, I probably would have done it already, it's either in this cut or it isn't, of the design process on the IQ stick. So let me know what you think of the idea of using two different pantos in the same quilt. If you don't want to comment on that, let me know what you think of the two new side lights, to see if that made a difference for you visually and being able to see